Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Wednesday, September 25th, 2019. Yesterday, the Democrats took dramatic steps toward what they call an impeachment inquiry, or inquiry. There are several ways to correctly pronounce that word. But it is largely theater, and, in my humble opinion, as a person who has been supporting impeachment of Trump since day one, the Democrats have chosen the wrong route to impeachment. And by acting prematurely before this, what is possibly a doctored memo of a conversation that's been released, before it came out today, I think the Democrats have taken a step that was not properly vetted, not fully, sussed out, and they didn't have enough information and evidence to take what appears to be a mostly dramatic step. Now, let's be clear. What Pelosi announced yesterday is that she has stopped obstructing the path to impeachment, and that she supports an impeachment inquiry around the recently revealed July 25th presidential phone call between Trump and Zelensky of Ukraine. And I consider this to be a bad bet on the part of the Democrats. And as you have heard, if you're a regular listener, it's been clear since Michael Cohen entered his plea deal, naming individual one as the man who told him to obstruct justice by paying off Stormy Daniels, and I always forget her name, the Playboy playmate. That is a criminal act. It's all they need. It's clear cut. There's no ambiguity in the way that Trump obstructed justice and violated campaign law in that event. And as we'll get to in a bit, the Democrats believe that, well, this is clear cut. It happened while he was in office. But I'm sorry to say that, like so many things, our Teflon Don is probably going to slip out of this one. And the way they have released this document, ahead of schedule, they said we'd have it by the end of the day tomorrow, makes me highly suspicious. This appears to me to be a replay of the Bill Barr tactic when St. Bob Mueller submitted his report to the Attorney General, and Barr turned around 48 hours or so later, issued his own summary of Mueller's limited hangout investigative report. And for what, almost a month, we were stuck with Barr's rendition of that report until it was finally released. And I expect we now are told that by the end of the day today, the full whistleblower complaint will be released to the committees of Congress. I think it's likely that will leak to the public, can't be assured. And I am deeply fearful that the Democrats have been snookered. And as you'll hear, they have strong reaction. They claim that the document released is sufficient. But it doesn't include anything that relates to a promise. That's what we were told during the media mediated leaks that dribbled out over the last 10 or 12 days. And it's supposed to be a matter of urgent concern. But in the phone call, at least based on this potentially doctored document, there is the conversation, moves from one topic to another. And it moves from Trump talking about how great the United States has been, how generous it's been to Ukraine and Germany, hasn't done diddly, That's not true, but that's what Trump says. And, of course, Zelensky always says yes to Trump in this phone call. I mean, he is kissing up to Trump in a way that will destroy his cred as a former Ukrainian reality TV star. So I don't see a smoking gun here. It's deeply embarrassing to Trump. It's wrong. All right, what Trump did was wrong. To use the leverage of his role as the president, his effort to withhold the funding from Ukraine. But he didn't mention withholding funding from Ukraine in the phone call with Zelensky, if this transcript can be believed. So I've read every word of the transcript. By the way, in preparation for today's podcast, I read more than 20 different articles from corporate media outlets about this scandal. And I'm bringing you a kind of distillation of all of that coverage and commentary. And it's important to note, right here in the language of this White House document, a memorandum of a telephone conversation is not a verbatim transcript of a discussion. The text in this document records the notes and recollections of Situation Room duty officers and NSC policy staff assigned to listen and memorialize the conversation in written form as the conversation takes place. And there are some ellipses, in this document that only leave us to wonder if there was something that's been edited out. So, first, Zelensky kisses up to Trump, says, "We want to drain the swamp here in our country. You're a great teacher." Trump says, "Well, very nice of you to say that. I will say that we do a lot for Ukraine, spend a lot of effort and a lot of time, much more than the European countries are doing." He singles out Germany. Zelensky responds, "Yes, you are absolutely right. Not only 100%, but actually 1,000%. And I can tell you I did talk to Angela Merkel, and I did meet with her, and I met and talked with Macron. I told them they are not doing quite as much as they need to do on the issues with the sanctions." Later in this same comment, he says, "I would also like to thank you for your great support in the area of defense. We are ready to continue to cooperate for the next steps." And that's where Trump shifts the conversation. And he says, "I'd like you to do us a favor." Now, Trump is skilled. He is a con man of great determination and achievement. He knows how to lay out a brushback, a squeeze, and he does it pretty artfully here without, in my view, triggering any sense of a quid pro quo. Now, he does make a reference to CrowdStrike. We'll be coming back to that. He's asking about a server in Ukraine, and that's related to the 2016 election. He says, "I'd like you to get to the bottom of it. Whatever you can do, it's very important that you do it if that's possible." So again, these are words where the more powerful American president is skillfully telling Zelensky what he expects. But he didn't order him to do it. And this will benefit Trump when this is scrutinized later in impeachment or anywhere else. So then Trump tells him that, Rudy Giuliani's a great guy. In fact, Zelensky brought up Giuliani first, said that he had been in touch with Zelensky's office. And so Trump kind of gilds the lily about Rudy and says that, please work with him on this. And then he shifts to this. He says, the other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the attorney general would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution. So if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me. And then Zelensky says, well, I just won the parliamentary election, so the next prosecutor general will be 100% my person, and he will start as a new prosecutor. Then he says, if you have any information that would you can provide us for this investigation, that would be helpful. So Zelensky is quite compliant, at least in his language. He may be just shining Trump on and bullshitting him in pretty good English. But at the end of this call, I don't find a smoking gun. And that's why I believe the more effective route to impeachment is to use the Cohen plea deal. You can back it up with the obstruction of justice of Trump by around the Russiagate issues and the Mueller investigation. But I don't believe that there's enough gunpowder in this Ukraine bomb to blow Trump up. So Nancy Pelosi made additional statements. The president has tried to make lawlessness a virtue in America and is now exporting it abroad. We have Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic Caucus chairman. Period, full stop. That is lawless. That undermines our national security. That is an abuse of power. That is unpatriotic. Jerry Nadler, chair of the Judiciary Committee, marveled that the Attorney General has now been pulled in and called on Barr to recuse himself. Pelosi, I've got another quote from her here. The release of the notes of the call by the White House confirms that the president engaged in behavior that undermines the integrity of our elections, the dignity of the office he holds, and our national security. The president has tried to make lawlessness a virtue in America and is now exporting it abroad. I respect the responsibility of the president to engage with foreign leaders as part of his job. It is not part of his job to use taxpayer money to shake down other countries for the benefit of his campaign. Either the president does not know the weight of his words or does not care about ethics or his constitutional responsibilities. She went on. The record of the call released by the White House confirms our worst fears. The president abused his office by directly and repeatedly asking a foreign country to investigate his political rival, and open investigations meant to help the president. Not once, not twice, more than half a dozen times during one telephone call. This was a shakedown. The president of the United States asked for a favor after the Ukrainian president expressed his country's need for weapons to defend against Russian aggression. Now, I understand the spin. I just ran through the call for you. If you just take that narrow portion, it looks bad for Trump. But I don't believe that you can find that that is a violation of law. Now, Trump's reaction is that the reconstruction of the call shows that he didn't exert pressure on his counterpart. It was going to be the call from hell. It turned out to be a nothing call, other than a lot of people saying, I never knew you could be so nice. But the Democrats keep pouncing. Catherine Clark, Massachusetts Congresswoman, vice chair of the House Democratic Caucus, said Trump's decision to ask the Ukrainian president for a favor amounted to a crime in and of itself. The crime is when you ask for that favor, when you inject politics into foreign policy. The initial reading shows that not only was Rudolph Giuliani brought in, but the Department of Justice, Attorney General. That is exactly the crime we were concerned about, blurring those lines between the political, our national security, and the official role of the president. But I don't believe that matches the claim that this is the simple criminal act by Trump that everyone can understand and be offended by. And get this. After a 5-week summer vacation, House leaders do not plan to cancel a scheduled 2-week recess that begins this Friday. By one count, there are less than 35 working days for the House and the Senate left in this calendar year. And they're going to take another break. They say that Judiciary and Intelligence committees will remain active, but I'm not sure what that means. Then to this claim that this call was far more damning than Democrats expected. Well, I don't know what they were expecting. Here's Congressman Jim Himes. Shocking. This goes beyond poor judgment or an ethical lapse on the president's part. This is premeditated criminal behavior. It appears in the conversation after a disciplinary aid and reeks of a proposed quid pro quo. Harley Ruda from Orange County, California, one of the freshmen who was a Republican until shortly before he filed to run for this seat. He is one of those people at risk, but he now supports impeachment because we have evidence of corruption by the president, that he admitted trying to influence a foreign government for the purposes of influencing the 2020 election, looking for dirt on his number one opponent based on polling right now. We don't need a quid pro quo. Oh, really? And here is a statement from the committee chairs, including Elliot Engel of Foreign Affairs, Maxine Waters of Financial Services, and Richie Neal of Ways and Means. The record of the call released by the White House confirms our worst fears that the president abused his office by directly and repeatedly asking a foreign country to investigate his political rival. Now, it had been that he ordered, he pressured, he forced, he intimidated Zelensky. But now they have to acknowledge that based on this possibly doctored transcript, that he asked. He said, "Do me a favor." And that is a mob mentality. There's no question about it. Not sure you'll find it impeachable. Now, one thing that has fallen apart was the claim that Trump was making that the central focus of the call was not on Biden and his son, but on the corruption already in Ukraine. But based on this so-called transcript, there is no mention. There are zero mentions of corruption. Trump made a lot of congratulatory comments, but it was Zelensky who brought up draining his swamp and figures of speech like that. Then we go to the New York Times. It says 6 key moments of the phone call based on this recently released document. Number 1, Trump asked for an investigation of the Bidens. We've covered that. They write, in 2018, Biden talked about his effort to get the prosecutor Shokin removed. At a Council on Foreign Relations event, Trump supporters have used a brief video clip from those remarks as part of their insinuations that the vice president was trying to protect Burisma Holdings from prosecution. Biden did not portray his effort to get Shokin out as stopping any prosecution of Burisma Holdings. Well, duh. I mean, he knew his wayward son was getting paid big cash to sit on this board, and it was only because his name is Biden. Number 2, Trump alluded to American aid while not explicitly linking his request to unfreezing it. And that's what I've told you. Zelensky agreed to pursue an inquiry into the Bidens. That is correct. He was very responsive to Trump's entreaties. Trump said Barr would call the Ukrainian president about another investigation, but according to the Justice Department, Barr didn't know about this until well after the call took place, and so far he claims he has not been involved with this. And here is a statement in the New York Times. The special counsel's report, that's Mueller, which Trump disparages in the phone call, made clear that Russian military officers hacked the DNC mail server. There is no evidence that the Ukrainians were involved. But in May, Attorney General Barr launched his own investigation into the Russian investigation and its origins. Now, this claim that there is no evidence that the Ukrainians were involved, I support that. There's also no evidence that the Russians were involved, but the New York Times, based on the phony language of the Mueller investigation report, continues to make that claim. And this, of course, just muddies the waters even further. So this is, the Times also makes an issue that Trump repeatedly told Zelensky to work with Rudy Giuliani, and that because he is not a government lawyer, he is Trump's personal lawyer and a volunteer, as we're told, that this is a violation of protocol. That's true. Is it a crime? Is it impeachable? I don't know. Then we go to BuzzFeed. 5 moments in Donald Trump's phone call that could fuel the impeachment investigation. And, of course, listicles are the big thing at BuzzFeed, 5 ways to thin thighs and all that stuff. But when you look at their claims, they're very weak. The two presidents repeatedly talked business as Trump asked Zelensky to do him favors. Okay. That's not actionable in a criminal context. Now, I recognize that impeachment doesn't require the same level of criminality that you and I would face if we were accused of a felony. But these claims here, Trump talked about involving his personal lawyer. I just touched on that from the New York Times claim. And that Trump asked the Ukrainian president to help attack the Mueller investigation. That's the CrowdStrike reference. Now, Rush Limbaugh claims, I listened to him for a few minutes this morning, that the CrowdStrike reference is to an investigation CrowdStrike did unrelated to the DNC hack. It was about a Ukrainian military app that had been hacked. And according to Limbaugh, the report submitted by CrowdStrike was false, and they ultimately withdrew it. Those are the only details I know about that reference, and I share it with you with my own confusion about what they're actually saying. Here's Adam Schiff. Let's be clear, no quid pro quo is required to betray our country. Trump asked a foreign government to interfere in our elections. That is betrayal enough. The corruption exists whether or not Trump threatened explicitly or implicitly that a lack of cooperation could result in withholding military aid. That's a stretch. It truly is. And this is why I see the Democrats in what can be called a premature ejaculation. And you know, ejaculation isn't just a male orgasm. Ejaculation is an exclamation, an expression. And I believe the Democrats made an expression yesterday that was premature. And we have Elizabeth Warren and Julian Castro, candidates for president, saying that this memo released today is a smoking gun. Warren, if this version of events, if this is the version of events the president's team thinks is most favorable, he is in very deep jeopardy. We need to see the full whistleblower complaint, and the administration needs to follow the law now. Castro said that Congress should cancel its recess starting this Friday, and I agree with him on that. And here's Nancy Pelosi urging fellow Democratic leaders to keep the impeachment investigation narrowly focused on Trump and his dealings with the president of Ukraine. She said that this morning after she saw this memo. And again, I believe that this is the wrong leg to stand on. It will collapse. It will be spun around by Trump and by the Republicans. And to conduct an impeachment without a single Republican vote coming out of the House, that will send a signal to the Senate that they can be obstructive too, and this will go nowhere. So the argument is, again, that this is what people can understand. Here's Debbie Dingell of Michigan. I think we need to focus on what this very clear threat to national security and to our Constitution is. I think a lot of the American people understand that. We need to focus on something that everybody understands. Well, that was the claim used to emphasize WMD as the reason to go to war in Iraq in 2003. Because it was easy for people to understand. It didn't matter if it was true. It was a sales pitch. And now I consider this, as you know, a very weak line of argument, line of attack. And here is Representative G.K. Butterfield, Democrat in North Carolina. We got to go narrow, no question about it. I would hope within a 6-week frame we could get the evidence on the table so the American people can see it, and hopefully we'll have some resolution before the holidays. Who are you kidding? And here's another story at BuzzFeed. The Ukraine story is a much easier sell than the Mueller report ever could have been. And once again, Mueller did engineer the conviction, the plea deal of Michael Cohen, and that remains to this day a much stronger attack on Trump that could lead to his impeachment and possible removal, although I recognize that is a reach. Here's the New York Times publishing today on the offense being played by the Biden campaign team I call it damage control because over the weekend, the Biden campaign emailed the news media to declare in bold underlined words that any story would be misleading if it did not state up front that Trump's claims of wrongdoing by Joe Biden and his son Hunter were unsubstantiated. And the media has complied. As I pointed out yesterday, virtually every article exonerates Biden. Just says, there's nothing there. He didn't do anything wrong. And just the ugly optics of the U.S.-backed coup leading to the installation of the Candyman Petro Poroshenko as the leader of Ukraine. Then our vice president's son gets put on the board of the leading energy company, Burisma Holdings. Burisma's oligarch owner is forced out of the country by Poroshenko. And the investigation into the oligarch was shut down, and there are differing explanations for that. And yesterday, I cited James Risen's article in the New York Times in 2015. Today, he's responding not directly to me, but to those who have used that article, and he's re-spinning it. At The Intercept, Risen headline reads, I wrote about the Bidens and Ukraine years ago. Then the right-wing spin machine turned the story upside down. And he acknowledges what I read yesterday, that Biden went to Ukraine to fight corruption and that message was undermined by the association of his son Hunter, I'm quoting now, with one of Ukraine's largest natural gas companies, Burisma Holdings, and its owner, Mykola Zlakevsky. And Risen explains that the British money laundering investigation was stymied by the Ukrainian prosecutors' refusal to cooperate. So they're claiming that Shokin was protecting Zlokevsky. But it's fair to say that in protecting him, he was protecting Burisma Holdings and, in turn, Hunter Biden. Now, I acknowledge that this deserves further investigation. I don't have a smoking gun that Hunter Biden colluded with Joe Biden in any direct way. But when Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion of American-authorized money for Ukraine until the prosecutor was fired, well, that's a stinky mess. And no media exoneration, in my view, is sufficient to overcome it. Now, today, there have been a couple of new developments as Trump and Zelensky met at the United Nations. And Zelensky told reporters with cameras rolling, I think you've read everything. I don't want to be involved in the democratic open elections in the United States. But he said his July conversation with Trump was normal. They discussed many things. And, quote, nobody pushed me. Meanwhile, we're getting word that the White House is going to have to decide whether to claim executive privilege when the acting director of national intelligence, Joe Maguire, appears before Congress tomorrow. The White House is denying that Maguire has reportedly threatened to resign if they attempt to stonewall his testimony tomorrow. So this could be an interesting showdown. He could be the Elliot Richardson of the replay of Nixon's Saturday Night Massacre here. And Trump took swipes at Pelosi, saying that she has lost her way. He thinks the speaker has been taken over by the radical left. Nancy Pelosi, as far as I'm concerned, says Trump, unfortunately, she's no longer the Speaker of the House. Well, you can try to make your own reality, Don, but not going to work there. Oh, and get this, you may have heard. Yesterday, the White House thrashed out a bunch of rebuttal, anti-impeachment talking points for Republicans to use, and they emailed them to Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats. And I heard the most common one, and that is Republicans saying, yeah, we want to see this whistleblower report released, and then we want to investigate the Bidens. I heard a guy on, I can't even remember his name, but he was a Republican on PBS last night, and he said that 6 times in a row. By the head count, We now have 209 votes supporting an impeachment inquiry in the House of Representatives. One independent, likely Justin Amash of Michigan, and 208 Democrats. They need a total of 218 to pass a bill of impeachment, an article of impeachment. And there are 235 total Democrats in the House. Frank Bruni at the New York Times is terrified of impeachment, and in his column today he says you should be too, because nobody can predict how it will play out. Trump may play the victim and benefit from it. And that, he writes, during the Democratic primary and the general election, the Trump melodrama and the Trump spectacle would overshadow all else. Look, Trump never lets the news go for more than 3 or 4 hours without saying, look at me. Look at me. So I think that's a non-issue. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Great people like William Janetta in Durham, North Carolina. He just renewed his annual subscription by sending me some cash in the mail. Thank you very much, William. And I want to thank Craig and Peggy Daniels in North Bend, Oregon, longtime listeners going back to when I had a syndicated radio show in the aughts. And I know they live on a fixed, limited income. And so when Craig sends a check, it is often triggered by something I said. And he said, as to the 9/11 broadcast and the podcasts which have reached my ears, there's only one honest, rational, informed voice, yours. And so he sent me a check. I really appreciate that, Craig. Thank you very much. And if you're not a subscriber, you can fix that right away. Just go to peterbcollins.com, click on menu, click on the tab that says Become a Subscriber. You'll hit the sign-up page, and you can choose the level of support that's comfortable for you. And if you're like William and you'd prefer to deal with the U.S. mail and avoid PayPal, just address your correspondence to Box 150-660, San Rafael, California, zip code 94915. Stunning news from Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu ain't dead yet. In the horse trading that is going on to try to form a government, Netanyahu came up with one more seat in the Knesset than his blue and white opponent, Benny Gantz. And so the president of Israel, Reuven Rivlin, has once again tapped Netanyahu. He has 28 days to try to form a government based on a 61-seat majority. He failed to do it after the election this past spring. And it pains me to see a new lease on life for the BB. Elizabeth Warren has surged to the top of a national poll of Democratic likely voters. She is ahead of Biden, 27-25, and Bernie Sanders has slipped to 16% in this new national poll. Honduras has been forced to knuckle under like El Salvador and Guatemala and has signed one of the scam agreements regarding asylum. And finally today, Al Franken is working on his rehabilitation. And he's decided to return to the job that he did pretty weakly before he became a United States Senator from his birth state of Minnesota. Al Franken will return to talk radio on Sirius XM with The Al Franken Show starting on Saturday. And he's going to bring in his friends like Chris Rock and former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. They're both really funny. Well, one of them is. And I just have to say, I wish Al no ill. But he was a terrible radio host. He was the marquee star paid millions of dollars by Air America, and he sucked. He didn't generate ratings. He was boring to listen to. Only funny when he did a live show on a college campus. But Al Franken will be on a satellite radio near you starting soon. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. Feel free to share it, particularly with people who have questions about impeachment. I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.